The transport ship's metal floor was cold against Jake Miller's bare feet. He pressed his face against the narrow window, watching his home world shrink to a tiny blue dot among the stars. The 8-year-old boy hadn't cried when the Vorgan soldiers dragged him from his mother's arms. He hadn't cried during the 3-day journey through space. But now, staring at everything he'd ever known disappearing into the darkness, a single tear rolled down his cheek. "Move along, human spawn." The guard's voice buzzed like angry insects. Its 6 legs clicked against the corridor as it shoved Jake forward with one of its sharp appendages. Jake stumbled but caught himself. He'd learned quickly that showing fear only made things worse. The Vorgans enjoyed fear the way humans enjoyed sunshine. They fed on it, laughed at it, passed it around like candy. The prison moon of Kafthara loomed ahead through the viewport. It looked like a giant black pearl, cold and lifeless. No atmosphere, no water, nothing but rock and the massive fortress built into its surface. Jake had heard whispers about this place back home. Even the adults spoke of it in hushed voices, as if saying its name too loud might summon its horrors. "Why are you sending me there?" Jake asked quietly. "I didn't do anything wrong." The guard's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Your colony refused to pay the child quota tax. Someone had to pay the price. Lucky you." Lucky. Jake almost laughed at that. His whole world had refused to hand over their children to the Vorgan Empire's work camps. So the Empire took one child anyway as punishment and warning. They held a lottery. Jake's name was drawn. His parents fought and screamed, but Vorgan law was absolute. Refuse the Empire, and the Empire takes what it wants anyway. The ship docked with a heavy clang that echoed through Jake's bones. More guards appeared, surrounding him like he was dangerous. A small boy who barely reached their lowest joints. What did they think he was going to do? They marched him through corridors carved from pure black stone. The walls seemed to swallow light itself. Every few feet, cells lined the passages, and Jake caught glimpses of creatures he'd never imagined. Some had too many eyes. Others had no eyes at all. A few reached through the bars toward him, whether in warning or plea he couldn't tell. "Where are you taking me?" Jake's voice came out smaller than he wanted. "Special accommodations," another guard buzzed. "Warden's orders. He wants to make an example of you." They descended deeper and deeper into the moon's core. The temperature rose with each level. Sweat beaded on Jake's forehead. His prison jumpsuit, already too large, clung to his small frame. Finally, they reached a massive door covered in symbols Jake didn't recognize. Ancient markings that seemed to pulse with a faint red glow. 2 guards worked the controls while a third kept its weapon trained on Jake, as if the boy might suddenly develop superpowers and attack. The door groaned open, revealing a cavern so vast that Jake couldn't see the far walls. Heat blasted out like an oven. The space was lit by streams of molten rock flowing through channels carved into the stone. And in the center, chained to the floor by massive restraints, were 3 creatures that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Dragons. Not the fairy tale kind from Earth stories. These were real, ancient, and terrifying. The smallest was still the size of a bus. Their scales caught the firelight, creating patterns of shadow and flame across their massive bodies. Their eyes, though. Their eyes held something Jake recognized. The same exhaustion, the same defeat, the same quiet desperation he'd seen in his father's face when the soldiers took Jake away. "Meet your new roommates, human." The warden's voice came from speakers overhead. Jake looked up to see observation windows lining the upper walls. Dozens of Vorgan faces pressed against the glass, watching. Waiting. The warden continued, "The Draker are our most prized prisoners. Ancient, powerful, and completely broken. They haven't eaten a proper meal in weeks. I wonder how long a small human child will last down there." Laughter echoed from the speakers. Cold, clicking laughter that made Jake's skin crawl. The guards shoved him forward into the cavern. The door slammed shut behind him with a finality that crushed any hope of escape. Jake stood there, a tiny figure in an enormous space, facing 3 dragons who slowly turned their massive heads toward him. Jake's legs trembled. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. But he didn't run. Where would he go? Instead, he did the only thing that made sense to an 8-year-old boy who'd lost everything. He sat down on the hot stone floor, pulled his knees to his chest, and waited to see what would happen next. Above him, the Vorgans watched and laughed. Before him, the 3 dragons stared with eyes that had witnessed centuries of suffering. And somewhere in that moment, in that impossible situation, something began that would shake an empire to its foundations. The first 3 days Jake didn't move much. He sat in his corner of the cavern as far from the dragons as possible, watching them watch him. The heat was unbearable at first. His lips cracked. His throat felt like sandpaper. But slowly his body adjusted. Or maybe he was just too exhausted to notice anymore. The dragons didn't attack. They barely moved at all. Sometimes one would shift its weight, chains rattling like thunder. Sometimes another would release a long, slow breath that sent ripples of heat across the cavern floor. But mostly they just lay there, ancient and still as mountains. On the fourth day, the guards threw down Jake's food ration. A single nutrient bar, hard as a rock and about as tasty. It hit the ground near the center of the cavern, exactly halfway between Jake and the dragons. The Vorgons were testing him, waiting to see if he'd risk crossing that open space. Jake's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, saving his previous ration as long as possible. But starvation has a way of making decisions simple. He stood up on shaky legs and walked toward the bar. The largest dragon, the one with scars crisscrossing its dark red scales, lifted its head slightly. Its eyes, golden and bright despite everything, followed Jake's movement. The boy froze halfway there, his heart racing. The dragon's nostrils flared, tasting the air. Then, slowly it lowered its head back down. Permission maybe. Or indifference. Jake couldn't tell which. He grabbed the nutrient bar and hurried back to his corner. But as he unwrapped it, something stopped him. A memory of his mother splitting her dinner portions to make sure he ate enough. A memory of his father sharing his water ration during the drought. His parents taught him something the Vorgons could never understand. Jake broke the bar into 4 pieces. 3 large portions and 1 small one for himself. Then, before fear could change his mind, he walked toward the dragons. "Hey," he said softly. His voice sounded strange in the vast space. "I know you're probably not even hungry anymore. But this is all I've got, and it feels wrong to eat alone." The scarred dragon's eyes opened fully now. All 3 dragons were staring at him. Jake's hands trembled as he placed the first piece of food in front of the scarred one. Its head was bigger than Jake's entire body. One snap of those jaws could end him instantly. "My name's Jake," he continued, moving to the second dragon. This one was sleeker, with midnight blue scales that seemed to absorb light. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I figure talking is better than sitting in silence." He placed the second piece down. The blue dragon's eyes widened slightly. The third dragon was oldest, its scales faded to a dull bronze, its body thinner than the others. Jake gently set the last large piece in front of it. "I'm sorry, it's not much. It's all they gave me." He backed away to his corner and sat down, nibbling on his small portion. The dragons didn't move. They stared at the food like it was a puzzle they'd forgotten how to solve. Above, through the observation windows, Jake could see Vorgon faces pressed against the glass. They were waiting for violence. For the dragons to snap up the food and the foolish boy with it. Minutes passed. Then the oldest dragon, moving slowly as if every motion hurt, leaned forward. Its tongue, surprisingly gentle, took the food. It chewed carefully, and something that might have been a sigh escaped its throat. One by one the other 2 dragons ate. And when they finished, all 3 looked at Jake with something different in their eyes. Not hunger. Not hatred. Something else entirely. The days turned into weeks. Jake talked to them constantly, filling the silence with stories from Earth. He told them about rain which they'd never seen. About oceans which seemed to fascinate them. About his dog, Bailey, who used to sleep at the foot of his bed. His voice became their entertainment, their connection to something beyond pain and chains. Slowly, impossibly, they began to respond. The scarred one, who Jake learned was called Ashkar through careful gestures and patience, started making low rumbling sounds when Jake told funny stories. The blue dragon, Velmara, began humming. It started soft, barely audible, but grew stronger each day. The old one, Drathnos, watched Jake with increasing intensity, as if seeing something no one else could. Jake noticed their wounds, old injuries that had never healed properly. He tore strips from his jumpsuit, making crude bandages. The dragons let him approach, let him touch their ancient scales, let this small human boy tend to hurts that had festered for decades. "You know what I think?" Jake said one evening, cleaning a gash on Ashkar's foreleg. "I think they're scared of you. That's why they keep you down here. That's why they chain you up and starve you. Because somewhere deep down they know that you're better than them." Ashkar's eyes met his. And for the first time since Jake arrived, the dragon's chest began to glow. Faint like embers buried under ash, but there. Light. Warmth. Life returning to something everyone thought was dead. Velmara started singing that night. Not humming, but actual song in a language Jake didn't understand. The sound filled the cavern with something the Vorgons couldn't quantify or control. Oh. And in the observation windows above, the guards stopped laughing. They started watching more carefully. Started worrying about what they'd unleashed by throwing a human boy into the dragon's prison. They were right to worry. The sickness hit Jake on a cold morning, if morning even existed in this sunless prison. He woke up coughing, his lungs burning like he'd inhaled fire. His vision blurred. The cavern spun around him in dizzying circles. "Just a cold," he muttered, trying to stand. His legs gave out immediately. He collapsed onto the stone floor, his body shaking with fever. The dragons noticed instantly. Ashkar's chains rattled as he strained forward, trying to reach the boy. Velmara released a high-pitched sound that echoed off the walls, almost like a cry for help. Drathnos, the oldest, moved faster than Jake had ever seen him move, pulling against his restraints until the metal groaned. Jake tried to crawl toward his water ration, but his arms wouldn't cooperate. His body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The toxic atmosphere of the prison moon was finally taking its toll. His human lungs weren't designed for this place. The air was too thin, too filled with sulfur and chemicals that slowly poisoned anyone who breathed it long enough. "I'm okay," Jake whispered, though he clearly wasn't. "Just need to rest." But rest didn't come. The fever climbed higher. Jake's teeth chattered despite the cavern's heat. His skin turned pale, then gray. He curled into a ball, struggling for each breath. Through his fading consciousness, Jake heard something he'd never heard before. The dragons were talking to each other, their voices deep and urgent. Ancient words in a language that predated most civilizations. They were arguing about something, their tones shifting from hesitation to determination. Then Drathnos spoke in broken English, words forced through a throat not designed for human speech. "Boy. Jake. Come." Jake wanted to respond, but his body wouldn't obey. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. He thought about his mother, wondered if she knew he was dying. Wondered if anyone would even tell her. Suddenly Ashkar roared. Not a roar of anger, but of decision. The sound shook dust from the cavern ceiling. His chest began to glow, that same ember light Jake had seen weeks ago, but brighter now. Hotter. More alive. Velmara joined in, her scales shimmering with blue flame. Drathnos's bronze body erupted with golden light. All three dragons were burning from the inside out, their ancient fire returning after centuries of dormancy. The chains holding them began to glow red, then white-hot. But the dragons weren't trying to break free. They were doing something else, something that made the Vorgan guards in the observation window scramble for alarms. 3 streams of fire, each a different color, shot across the cavern toward Jake's unconscious form. But this wasn't destructive flame meant to burn. It was life itself, pure essence, the core of what made the Draker legendary across 1,000 worlds. The fire wrapped around Jake like a cocoon, gentle as a blanket despite its intensity. It sank into his skin, his bones, his lungs. The dragons were giving him something precious, something they could never get back. They were sharing their immortal fire with a dying human child. Jake's eyes snapped open, glowing with reflected flame. His body arched as the transformation took hold. The sickness burned away instantly. His lungs expanded, adapting to breathe the toxic air as easily as Earth's atmosphere. His senses exploded with new awareness. He could feel the dragon's emotions like they were his own. Pain, hope, determination, love. The fire faded, leaving Jake gasping on the floor. But he wasn't weak anymore. He felt stronger than ever, his small body humming with energy he didn't understand. He sat up slowly, staring at his hands. They looked normal, but he could feel something different running through his veins. Something ancient and powerful. "What did you do?" Jake whispered. Drathnos spoke again, his English clearer now, as if the connection had improved his ability to communicate. "Saved you. Bonded you. Made you kin. But why? I'm nobody. Just a kid." Ashkar's voice rumbled like thunder. "You are the first in 300 years to show us kindness. To see us as people, not monsters. Our fire was dying, boy. You rekindled it with your humanity." Velmara's gentler voice added, "Now we share life. What hurts you we feel. What we know you can access. We are connected, Jake Miller, across species and stars." Jake stood up and the world looked different. He could see heat signatures now, sense the flow of energy through the prison systems. He could feel the vibrations of guards walking on levels far above. Most incredibly, he understood the dragons perfectly, their words translating instantly in his mind. "I can hear you clearly now," Jake said, amazed. "And we can feel your hope," Drathnos replied. "Something we'd forgotten existed." Jake walked to the nearest wall and placed his hand against it. Information flooded his mind. The prison's layout. Its power sources. Its weaknesses. The dragon's ancient knowledge combined with his human curiosity created something neither possessed alone. This prison, Jake said slowly, it's built on top of something old. Something that belongs to you. Ashkar's eyes widened. The temples are sacred places. They're using them, Jake continued, his enhanced senses reading the energy flows. The whole prison runs on technology stolen from your people. The containment fields, the power systems, everything. The three dragons looked at each other, then back at Jake. A new understanding passed between them, human and Drake are united by fire and purpose. They made a mistake throwing you in here, Velmara said. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a happy smile, but one of determination. Yeah, I think they really did. Above them, alarms began to sound. The Vorgans had finally realized that something impossible had just happened in the Dragon Vault. Something that would change everything. Retry. Warden Techville descended into the Dragon Vault with 20 armed guards. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among Vorgans. The footage from the observation cameras showed something impossible. The human child wasn't dead. Worse, the dragons were glowing again, their eyes bright with an intelligence that had been absent for decades. Seize the boy, Techville ordered. Execute him immediately. Before this situation escalates. Jake stood in the center of the cavern, flanked by three dragons who watched the approaching guards with newfound alertness. He looked small and fragile compared to the armed soldiers, but something had changed in the way he carried himself. His eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there before. You can't kill him, Ashkar's voice boomed. He is under our protection now. Techville laughed, a harsh buzzing sound. Your protection? You're chained to the floor, beast. You protect nothing. Then let me show you something, Jake said quietly. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his new senses. He could feel the energy flowing through the prison systems, see the pathways carved by ancient Draker engineers millennia ago. The Vorgans had built their facility on top of sacred temples, but they didn't truly understand what they'd stolen. Jake placed both hands on the floor. Power surged through him, amplified by his connection to the dragons. The ancient temple beneath them recognized the Draker essence flowing through the boy's veins. Systems that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up. The containment field generators throughout the prison started fluctuating. Warning lights flashed on control panels 3 levels up. Techville's communicator exploded with panicked reports from his staff. What are you doing? The warden shrieked. Stop this immediately. I'm just asking the temple nicely, Jake replied. Turns out it remembers who built it. And it doesn't like what you've done to the place. Velmara began to sing, her voice resonating through the stone itself. The sound waves, combined with Jake's connection and Drathnos' ancient knowledge, created a harmonic frequency that the temple's systems had been designed to recognize. One by one, locks throughout the facility began to open. Not just in the Dragon Vault. Everywhere. Cell doors slid open on 12 different levels. Hundreds of prisoners, species from across the Empire, stumbled into corridors for the first time in years. Some had been imprisoned for actual crimes. Most were like Jake, political prisoners taken to punish their worlds for defying Vorgan rule. Chaos erupted throughout the facility. Guards abandoned their posts. Alarms screamed from every speaker. Techville's 20 soldiers backed toward the exit, realizing they were vastly outnumbered by the situation spiraling out of control. You've doomed yourself, human, Techville hissed. The Empire will glass this entire moon for this rebellion. Maybe, Jake admitted. But at least everyone will know the truth first. While Jake had been learning the prison systems over the past weeks, he'd also been watching the guards. He'd seen them record everything, storing data in the facility's central computers. Interrogation footage. Torture sessions. Records of innocent beings imprisoned without trial. Evidence of the Vorgan Empire's cruelty spanning decades. Jake had spent 3 nights crawling through ventilation shafts his small size made accessible, reaching computer terminals and using his connection to the dragon's ancient knowledge to bypass security. He'd compiled everything into a single data package ready and waiting. Drathnos now. Jake shouted. The old dragon released a burst of energy directly at the prison's communication array. The surge overloaded safety protocols, hijacking the facility's entire broadcast system. Jake's data package exploded outward, transmitted on every frequency the prison used to communicate with the Empire. To military channels. To civilian networks. To news stations across 1,000 worlds. Images of children torn from their families. Footage of peaceful protesters being imprisoned. records of the Vorgans using prisoners for cruel experiments. And through it all, one video that would become the symbol of everything wrong with the Empire. 8-year-old Jake Miller sharing his food with dragons, bandaging their wounds, singing to them, showing more compassion to the Empire's most feared prisoners than the Empire had shown to anyone. The footage spread like wildfire. Species across the Empire watched a human child treat monsters with more dignity than the Vorgans treated their own citizens. They watched him stand up to an armed warden despite being small and powerless. They watched him choose mercy over revenge. In the cavern, Ashkar's chains finally gave way. Centuries of heat and stress, combined with the surge of energy, caused the restraints to shatter. The scarred dragon rose to his full height for the first time in 300 years, wings unfurling with a sound like thunder. Velmara and Drathnos broke free seconds later. 3 ancient Draker, legends made real, stood between Jake and the Vorgan guards. "You have a choice," Jake said to Techville. "Run now or answer for what you've done here." The warden looked at the freed dragons, at the boy who'd outsmarted his entire facility, at his guards who were slowly backing away. For once in his career, Techville made the smart choice. He ran. The dragons could have stopped him. Could have ended him with a single breath of fire. But Jake placed his hand on Ashkar's leg. "Let him go," the boy said. "We're better than that." Ashkar nodded slowly. "You are wise beyond your years, little brother." Together they walked toward the cavern exit. Freed prisoners parted to let them through, staring in awe at the human child who rode on a dragon's shoulder. They made their way up through 12 levels of chaos until they reached the surface. The prison moon's black sky stretched above them. In the distance, ships were already arriving. Some were Vorgan military vessels, coming to contain the situation. But others bore different flags. News agencies. Independent observers. Worlds that had seen the broadcast and demanded answers. Jake stood on the prison's landing platform, 3 dragons at his back, hundreds of freed prisoners behind them. He was still just a kid in an oversized jumpsuit. Still just 8 years old. But in that moment he looked like something more. "They're going to come for us," Velmara said softly. "I know," Jake replied. "But the whole Empire is watching now. They can't hide the truth anymore." Drathnos smiled, showing teeth that could tear through Starship Hull. "Then let us show them what truth looks like." Emperor Krixtal watched the footage for the 7th time from his throne room on the capital world. His compound eyes tracked every moment of the human child sharing food with the Draker, every gentle touch as the boy bandaged ancient wounds, every smile that showed nothing but pure compassion. The Emperor's advisors stood silent around him, waiting for orders that would determine the fate of billions. "Destroy the moon," one advisor suggested. "Eliminate all evidence." "Too late," another countered. "The broadcast reached 47 worlds before we could block it. Riots have already started on 6 colony planets." Krixtal's mandibles clicked slowly. He'd ruled the Vorgan Empire for 30 years through fear and absolute control. But fear only worked when everyone believed in your power. This human child, this Jake Miller, had done something the Emperor never imagined possible. He'd made the Empire look weak. Worse, he'd made them look cruel. "How many worlds are in open rebellion?" the Emperor asked quietly. 17, Your Majesty. And the number is growing by the hour. 17 worlds. Species that had submitted to Vorgan rule for generations were suddenly questioning everything. All because they'd watched a boy choose kindness over hatred. All because they'd seen what the Empire really was behind its military might. "Mobilize the fleet," Krixtal ordered. "I will go to this prison moon myself." His advisors gasped. "Your Majesty, the risk is necessary," the Emperor interrupted. "If I send ships to destroy them, we'll have 50 worlds in rebellion by tomorrow. If I do nothing, I look weak. But if I go there myself, if I face this situation directly, perhaps we can contain this before it destroys everything we've built." 3 days later, the Emperor's flagship arrived at the prison moon. He expected to find chaos, maybe a desperate group of escaped prisoners trying to steal ships and flee. What he found instead stopped him cold. The prison had been completely transformed. The freed prisoners hadn't scattered or attacked. They'd organized. Species that had been enemies worked together, clearing debris, treating the injured, establishing order. And at the center of it all, in the ancient Draker temple that lay beneath the prison, Jake Miller sat at a stone table with 3 dragons and representatives from a dozen different species. They were negotiating, planning, building something new. The Emperor's guards escorted him down through the prison levels to the temple chamber. The journey took 30 minutes, and with each step, Krixtal saw more evidence of cooperation. A Thendrian medic treating a wounded Vorgan guard. A Kelvin engineer helping repair damaged systems. Former prisoners working alongside their former captors to make the facility livable. When he entered the temple, every eye turned toward him. The Emperor expected fear, maybe hatred. Instead, he saw something that unsettled him more. Pity. Jake stood up from his seat. The boy barely reached Crixtal's midsection, but he didn't look intimidated. Emperor Crixtal. Thank you for coming. You've committed treason against the Empire, Crixtal stated. You've freed dangerous criminals. You've stolen military broadcasts. You've incited rebellion across 17 worlds. 18 now, Jake corrected gently. The Moran system joined an hour ago. And they're not rebellions, Your Majesty. They're just people asking questions. Questions like why you imprison children. Why you torture prisoners. Why you build your empire on fear instead of respect. Crixtal's guards raised their weapons, but the Emperor waved them down. You're a child. You understand nothing of governance, of maintaining order across thousands of worlds. Maybe not, Jake admitted. But I understand that throwing kids into prison doesn't make you strong. It makes you a bully. And I understand that even scary dragons deserve kindness. If I can figure that out at 8 years old, why couldn't you figure it out in 30 years as Emperor? Silence filled the chamber. No one had ever spoken to Crixtal this way. His guards waited for the order to execute the boy. His advisors expected him to declare war on the gathered species. The entire empire watched through broadcast feeds, waiting to see how their emperor would respond. Crixtal looked at the 3 Drakers standing behind Jake. Ashkar, Velmara and Drathnos. Legends he'd thought were broken and tamed. Their eyes burned with renewed fire, but they made no move to attack. They were waiting just like everyone else. What do you want? The Emperor finally asked. Jake glanced back at his companions, then returned his gaze to Crixtal. We want peace. Real peace, not the kind enforced by threats. We want the Draker freed from all Imperial prisons. We want the child quota tax abolished. We want prisoners given fair trials instead of being disappeared. We want you to stop ruling through fear and start leading through cooperation. And if I refuse? Then your empire falls apart, Drathnos rumbled. Not today perhaps, but soon. We have awakened 40 more Draker from stasis in the temples beneath this facility. Others sleep in temples across the empire. The boy's compassion has reminded us what we fought for millennia ago. Justice. Honor. Protection of the innocent. Ashkar stepped forward. We do not wish for war, Emperor. We have seen enough of death. But we will not allow this cruelty to continue. Choose wisely. Crixtal's mind raced through scenarios. Military action would unite the rebellious worlds against him. Executing Jake would make the boy a martyr, inspiring even more uprisings. Doing nothing would show weakness that would fracture the empire beyond repair. Or he could do something no Vorgan emperor had ever done. He could admit mistakes. He could change. You offer peace, Crixtal said slowly. What guarantees do I have that these freed Draker won't simply destroy my empire? Jake smiled. The same guarantee you're giving us. Trust. We trust that you can be better than you've been. You trust that we want peace more than revenge. The Emperor looked at this human child who'd accomplished the impossible. Who'd befriended dragons, freed a prison, started a revolution, and now stood before the most powerful being in the Empire without a trace of fear. Very well, Crixtal said. I accept your terms. The Vorgan Empire will become a confederation. Species will have representation. The Draker will serve as protectors, not prisoners. And you, Jake Miller, will be our first ambassador of peace. The chamber erupted in shock. Guards protested. Advisors argued. But the Emperor raised his hand for silence. This child has shown us something we forgot, Crixtal announced. That strength isn't measured in weapons or fear. It's measured in the courage to change when change is necessary. Jake extended his small hand toward the Emperor. Crixtal stared at it for a long moment, then reached out and shook it. The gesture was broadcast across every world in the Empire. Years later, the prison moon became something else entirely. A school where young beings from every species learned together. A memorial to those who'd suffered. A symbol of what happens when someone chooses compassion over cruelty. Jake grew up there, alongside friends from 100 different worlds. He never forgot the cold morning when he arrived as a condemned prisoner. Never forgot the moment he chose to share his food instead of hoarding it. Never forgot that the smallest act of kindness can change everything. The Empire learned too. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. They learned that humanity's greatest gift wasn't technology or violence. It was the simple ability to look at someone different, someone scary, someone considered a monster, and see a person worth saving. All because an 8-year-old boy named Jake Miller refused to let fear win.